welcome back. It has been a hot second. As of when I'm filming this, I haven't filmed in probably at least a month because I've been sick, I've had allergies, I've been very busy with my normal life. So I feel weird and awkward, but I am back with a pretty exciting video. So for those of you who don't know, I am actually South African, and as a South African I have come across many interesting misconceptions about what it's like living there, about the fact that it's even a country, where it is, why I'm from there, the whole spiel. And I've had my fair moments of where I've had to like bite my tongue because of things people have said to me. So it's a bit of a sensitive topic for me, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because there is a book called From the Jump by Lacie, Waldon, and it is set in South Africa. So naturally, when I found this out, I felt that it was my sole duty to read it and tell you whether or not it does South Africa justice. And then also I'll just give the entire book a review in general. So I have actually already finished this book. Upon starting it, I didn't realize how little of the book actually takes place in South Africa. I would guess to say maybe a third of the book is in South Africa, the rest of it is in California, I believe. So not a whole lot of the book is in South Africa, which I was kind of disappointed about, not gonna lie. I was really excited to read a book set in South Africa. Like, I miss home. It would have been really fun if more of it was there. But so I actually have a little notebook with notes that I made, and before I start, I do just want to say that this is set in the Durban area of South Africa, which I personally have not been to. I've been to many places, but unfortunately where it's set I haven't been to. So that being said, my opinions and stuff might not be 100% as accurate as someone who has been there, lived there, etc, but still better than someone who hasn't been there. So let's get started. First, I'm going to touch on the things that the book did well in terms of representing South Africa, which, first of all, as a whole, I do feel that South Africa was just portrayed fairly well in terms of scenery and descriptions and yada yada yada. I didn't have too many complaints really. Again, I haven't been there, but knowing the type of area it is set, the author seemed to do a pretty decent job at describing it, so I don't have any complaints about that. The other thing that the author did well, which I really enjoyed, was the main character had a little moment where she's like, I've never drank this much tea in my entire life, which I thought was hilarious. Like, I had to stop the audiobook to take a second to stop cackling because it is so funny and true. So obviously every person and every family differs, but approximately we have at least 2 to 3 cups of tea and or coffee a day. And basically how meal times work, at least with my family lives on a farm, like kind of in the middle of nowhere. They have a very scheduled, rigid lifestyle. And when I say family, I mean like my grandparents, my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins. So they have kind of like a very scheduled day-to-day. So this might be different for someone who lives in the city or whatever, but on average, even how I go about my days, most days, and like my parents, we have breakfast, which is early in the morning when you wake up, usually around like 7, 6. South Africa as a whole are more early birds. Most of our stores usually close around like 5 to 6 p.m. Whereas I know in like America, stores close more like 8, 9, 10 p.m. So that's a big difference for us. So we have breakfast at about 7-ish, 6-ish, depending on when you wake up. And then 10 to 11 in the morning is first tea time. So you have tea and or coffee, or not and or, but tea or coffee, and then you have a little savory snack like a scone or a rusk or something along those lines. And then usually around noon to 1 o'clock we have lunch, and then my family on the farm take nap time after lunch. I'm not even joking, literally 2 p.m. to 2:33 is nap time. I'm usually the only one awake because I don't like naps, but yes. And then around 3-ish, 2 to 3, just about an hour after everyone's woken up from their naps, it is tea time again. So then you have tea time and more of like a sweet snack. It's usually a baked good as well, cupcakes, cookies. I don't know what the English word is, but a popular one is koekcesters. So yeah, or sometimes you do have savory, but most of the time it's sweet. And then at 5 to 6 we have dinner time, and then those are like the scheduled meals. People have tea in between. And she also mentioned that it's very sweet and milky. That's a bit more based on personal preference, but we do have a lot of tea and we do have it sweet, at least I do. So I thought that was really funny that that was not only mentioned but like a thing, and it made me very happy to see, because South Africans do love their tea and their coffee, and we drink a lot of it. The other thing that she pointed out, which I did think to be fairly accurate, was when the main character first got to South Africa and the male love interest came and picked her up and they drove back to where they were staying, she mentioned that on a lot of the roads there aren't any street lights and it's very, very, very dark. And that is also very accurate. Obviously we do have street lights in really big cities and the surrounding area, but in the middle of nowhere or between small towns, we do have basically no street lights. Like between towns on the way to the farm to visit my family, it is actually pitch black. Like with the high beams on, you cannot see more than maybe like 10 feet in front of you. It's really, really dark, really difficult to drive at night. So that was another thing, and that was a small thing. It wasn't really mentioned too much. Same with the tea, but that is two things that were accurately represented that I thought I'd mention. And then obviously the other things that I got right was like monkeys swinging in trees and stuff. Like, we do have that, especially if you do stay in game reserves and things like that. It's very common to see monkeys regularly and other wild animals. But that does lead me into the negative slash wrongs of the book, which there aren't too many of, but one did set me off a little bit. So the smaller one isn't actually the author's fault, I believe. I think it's much, much closer to being the publisher's fault, but the narrator of the audiobook couldn't do a South African accent, like at all. The accent that the narrator did sounded not even much closer. It just was essentially an Indian accent. South African accents, there are like 3 main ones, and then each kind of like branch off into its own little tiny one, kind of like how in America you have country accent, but then you have like the different kinds a little bit. So we have like 3 circles, and then they branch off into like regional and things like that. So the main 3 accents that South Africa has is very British sounding. That is the first one. Then there's a very Dutch sounding one, and sometimes you'll hear those two mixed a little bit, and again, it's very regional and things like that. But those are, you're in one, the other, or a mixture, and then the other one is just your more stereotypical African accent, and obviously that one also varies depending on where you are, what language you grew up speaking, because South Africa does have 12 national languages. So we do have a very large branch of accents. However, unless you have immigrated from India, an Indian accent is not a South African accent at all. There are people there with them, but it's not a South African accent. The narrator couldn't do a South African accent, and that really bothered me. And it's a really, really small thing. The accent didn't even come into play that often, but it was just very frustrating to know that they hired someone without even checking to see if they sound accurate to the people they're representing. So that ticked me off a little bit. It wasn't the biggest of deals, but you know. And then the lost one, and this one is the one that made me the most angry. I actually had like a 30-minute rant about this to my boyfriend. But there's the scene where the main characters go camping. I don't know where they went camping. I forgot, and I didn't write it down in my little notes, and I read this quite a while ago. But they went camping, and if they went camping in any kind of nature reserve, game reserve area where you like pay to go there, it was completely and entirely misrepresented. That being said, maybe what happened here is something that happened to the author and she wrote it into her story. Like I said, I haven't been to where this is specifically set. I haven't been to the game reserves, to the hotels, wherever they stay. I haven't been there myself. But from my experience, and let me tell you, I have stayed in a multitude of game reserves in multiple Southern African countries, not just South Africa. So I know how game reserves work. I know what they're like. I know what to expect. So basically what happens is they are camping out in tents, and then in the middle of the night, the main character wakes up because she hears rummaging, and then the male love interest comes into her tent and he's like, oh, don't worry, it's just elephants. We must have not locked up our food. And she starts freaking out and she's like, oh my god, are they just going to bury our bodies and hide it because a place like this like guarantees your safety, and if we get trampled by elephants, like this will ruin their name, blah 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 blah. If it is a proper game reserve establishment, you will never be put in a situation where you could get trampled in your sleep by elephants or any animal. You are very safe in game reserves. If you are in a game reserve that has dangerous animals such as elephants, lions, hippos, rhinos, whatever, if you have those, they are kept separately from where the little resort is. So whether it's like a hotel, usually it's like huts and cabins, but it's caged off. So in order for you to go see those animals, you would have to take a safari through, or you could take your car as well, but you take it through to a gated part of the game reserve where those animals are kept separately for your safety. And by the way, if you don't know what a game reserve is, it's essentially a giant plot of land where there are huts and cabins and lodging for you, and then there are wild African animals in that essentially a farm, and you just pay to stay there and you see them and sometimes get to feed them and things like that. So if there are animals like that, you would never be put in a situation where if you're sleeping in a tent on the ground, elephants could just come and like trample over you and be in the same area. As that would literally never happen. I have stayed in game reserves with lions and all those other dangerous animals, and it's separated. There are literal fences with wires and spikes and sometimes even electricity to stop the animals from getting to you and hurting you. And I've also stayed in game reserves that don't have dangerous animals. They just have zebras, different types of antelope, monkeys, squirrels. And in those game reserves, the animals do wander around freely. We actually once had a deer come into our home, into our little chalet that we stayed in, but we got it out without any issue. So never would you be put in a situation where it's dangerous. In the one where the monkeys and the zebras and the antelope and whatever can walk around and can come to your little chalet and you can feed them and whatever, the most dangerous thing is a monkey stealing your phone. And honestly, you shouldn't have had your phone that close to the monkey. So that really peeved me off, because that situation that happened would not happen at any kind of establishment in South Africa. If that were to happen, that establishment should be closed down and would be closed down. That would literally never ever happen. And also, even in game reserves, in the ones that I stayed at without the scary animals, during the night, you'll hear security walking around. So there's security guards that does periodic strolls throughout the entire reserve to make sure that there are no animals trying to break into your hut. There are no poachers around trying to kill anything. Like, it is a very safe environment. There is security. Any animals that could cause threat to you are fenced away from you. Well, you're caged in technically, but you're away from it. There's a fence, you're fine. And what happened in that situation where she was sleeping on a one-person tent on the ground and there were just elephants like right there would never happen. It would actually never happen. And if that's based on a true story, then that place needs to be shut down, because no game reserve would ever or should ever put you in a situation like that. And even though I read this literally months ago at this point, I am still angry thinking about it, because that would literally, again, never happen. But that was the only things that was bad. And I'm gonna calm down now so I can give you the actual book review about what I thought about the book and if I recommend it. So overall, I did end up giving this book 3 stars. it was a fun read. I wish there was actually more of South Africa, I'm not gonna lie. And it was, aside from the two negative things, which only one of which is the author's fault, and again, that was a bad mistake, that was a bad thing to write, that would not happen ever, but I guess it's a good thing this is a fictional book. But I would recommend it. There were just the two things, the accents being misrepresented and the game reserve being misrepresented. But other than that, it did a good job at portraying South Africa. I did like the characters quite a lot. I really enjoyed the main character's story about how she's basically learning to be more free and allow herself to have fun and essentially be a human being. The love interest was great. I really enjoyed him. I would reread it and I definitely would recommend it. But at the end of the day, this was also just kind of a plain fun old rom-com. There wasn't really anything spectacular to me personally about it. I would recommend it. I did enjoy it. The characters were fun. It's pretty lighthearted and it's a really fun, colder read, because they go to South Africa, I believe, when it's winter there, so in like June, July, August. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. I don't remember when that's at, but I want to imagine that it's then. But yeah, it was a fun book. I did enjoy it. The only part that truly I hated was the game reserve thing. I'm sure you can tell since I'm still getting revved up about it, but it was well done. And I did also research the author before doing this video to make sure that it was like a valid video, because if the author was South African, I wouldn't have done this video, because then obviously it would have been very accurate. But she apparently is a flight attendant, so I assume she's been to South Africa on her job duties. I assume she's been to South Africa and she was inspired to write this. And again, good job. She did do a good job. It was just that one thing that really set me off. Maybe if that part didn't happen, this would have been a higher star rating. I don't know. But overall, I would recommend this. Just if you do read it, please keep in mind South Africa game reserves won't put you in danger. But yeah, just keep that in mind if you choose to read this. Let me know what you think of this book if you do end up reading it, or if you have read it, or if you're South African and you think that my opinions are completely wrong. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you like me or my videos, I would really appreciate a like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it. Thank you so much. Bye.